All right, let's go back. We're learning this mimer in Likuti Torah, one of the basic books of Chabad Hasidut, written by the first Rebbe of Chabad, that he wrote also the book Tanya. It's a big, thick book. See, look at this. See, thick book. Give a little idea. Let me put it. See, thick book, and it's packed with really interesting things. Now we're learning a mimer, a discourse, Hasidic discourse about salt. Salt. That's what we've been occupied in this whole week, of this mimer about salt. What's the thing about salt? Because salt was an integral part of every sacrifice. Every sacrifice had to have salt in it. Had to have salt. And it even says this strange thing about salt. It's called salt, Brit Melach. It's called the covenant of salt. And in a way, this exemplifies what happened in the Holy Temple. What's this whole idea of the Holy Temple? And it says Moshiach is going to build a third Holy Temple. And now the Holy Temple will not just be a spiritual Holy Temple and the temple in our soul and all this. Of course, there is it. Of course, there is it. The Holy Temple in our soul, of course. But Moshiach, in addition to that, to make everybody into a Holy Temple, he's also going to build a third Holy Temple so that we'll know what a Holy Temple is. We'll know what a Holy Temple is. And really, what is a Holy Temple? What's the whole idea of Holy Temple? Even now, the Jewish people, the religious people, when they pray, it's called a standing prayer, Shmona Esrei, Amidah, as they face the direction of the Holy Temple, no matter where they are in the world, or in Jerusalem. If they're in Jerusalem, they face where the Holy Temple is when they pray. Because the place of the Holy Temple, the very holy place of the Holy Temple is holy. And in Judaism, place, physical world, is of utmost importance. And what we do in the physical world, and serving God in the physical world. So that is, what do you say, personified, exemplified, whatever it is, by salt. Salt rolls up the whole thing of what is Judaism. And what is the Holy Temple? What does it mean to serve God? Salt. Why? Because what does salt do? We spoke about this many times. First of all, salt comes from the sea. Comes from the sea. So on one hand, it's made from water. Water makes things grow. But if you put salt on your land, then it kills everything. Makes everything that it can't grow. And salt itself has no taste, or not a pleasant taste. And if you put it on things, it gives them a taste. It can make them sweet. Salt also can destroy things. Right? Like we said, you put it on the land, salted land. But on the other hand, salt preserves things. So it has all these opposite aspects in it. And when we learned the Chumash, if you remember, a couple of days ago, we learned the Ramban and the Kli Yakar and all these others. They all brought different aspects of this whole thing, that salt contains in itself all these opposites, and it's very dynamic. And that's the whole essence of God's relationship with the Jewish people. Okay, so we skipped this. Here we skipped this one thing over here. And we said, Hine, Lefi zeh, according to this, that salt puts taste in everything, and salt changes everything. Tzarich lav, and we have to understand about matzah. And matzah is a puskin. We started it, but I think we skipped it, if I'm not mistaken. It says that according to the commentators and the rabbis, you're not supposed to put salt into matzah on Passover. You can look over there in the Torah, in the Shulchan Aruch, chapter 455. The Torah, it's not understood. According to what we said before, the Shorsh in the milk, the source of what is salt. Why should it be such a thing that in matzah, lo yam melech, why can't you put salt in matzah? Like it says in the Gemara, that matzah that matzah implies what? The lo maliach. Matzah means that it's what do you call unleavened bread. It's not salted. It has nothing. It's very, how do you say, basic. And also in the, what's this? Anyway, Tufnin, hey, over there in the, I think the tour, maybe it's Mr. Taz. Anyway, he writes, one of the commentaries writes, Lefi, because a melach who shorish adin, because salt, it's too severe. But that's the reason why it's too severe. It says 1 second, but that's not a very good reason. Exactly the opposite. Who mitok adinim. So put a little bit of salt in there, right? Salt, it's very severe. But on the other hand, we see that salt, if you put it on meat or something that's very, very bitter, it can make it sweet. So why not have a little bit of salt in the matzah? To remind us, we just explained about how this exemplifies what Judaism is, to sweeten up the world, to bring something eternal in the world. Salt, it never rots. Judaism is eternal. How it changes everything, how it takes out the bad, right? Sucks out the blood from the animal, from the meat. That's all good stuff. Why not put it in matzah? Matzah is Jewish food. Why not? But it's explained in Tikkun Zohar. In the Zohar, Tikkun Zohar. Like I explained to you, Tikkun Zohar, that's a book, 70 Kabbalistic explanations from Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. The Zohar, written by Rabbi Shimon's prized pupil, Rabbi Chaim Vital. And this is a book that has 70 different interpretations of just the first word of the Torah, Bereshit. 70 different Kabbalistic interpretations. And Tikkun Zohar, because it says like there's 70 faces to the Torah. So over there it says, you can look Tikkun chapter 69, Samach Tes, which page? Kuf Ches. Okay, if you're going to look at it, it says Lechem Oni. What does it mean that it's poor bread? Below milcha, without any salt. Why no salt? Begin because, this is Aramaic. The Zohar was written in Aramaic. Begin because the EU matzah prutza, because matzah has to be like a piece, broken. Ad the tahei shlema, because until it becomes complete, lo tzarich lekarva Allah melech. You shouldn't bring salt with it. The EU, because salt, melach, the letters of salt are the same thing as cholom. Like we said, cholom is this the punctuation mark. What is it? The vowel of O, and it comes out when you write it, it's a little dot on top of the letters. You don't see it in the Torah because there's no vowels in the Torah. There's no punctuation in the Torah. There's no vowels. Written just the letters, but nevertheless, the cholam is a dot on the top. What is this cholom? What is this letter? This vowel, which is just a straight line on a little dot on the top. Right? And sometimes it can be just written as just a dot. This is emtsa'i dekulu. This is the middle of everything. It's like the balancing point of everything. So why not put it into matzah? Why not put it into matzah? Melach. Why not put melach? Because it's the same letters as this letter cholam, which is the highest. It's above all the other letters. The Parish explains in Kisei Malchut, one of the explanations of the Tanya, of the Zohar, Shekesheyi Perusa, that when matzah is broken, he ot dalid, it's the letter dalid. Lashon dalut. Hainu lechem oni. This is lechem oni. What is matzah? Matzah is poor bread. So there's in the Hebrew language, in the Hebrew alphabet, the letters, some of the letters also are words themselves. Like, just take an example. Aleph means to teach. Beit is a house. Gimel means to give. Dalet means, among other things, it means to be poor. That's why it's called poor bread. But tzarich lashlimu, you have to take this dalet and complete it with the letter vav. Betocho, inside of it, shetiyeh, a little line that'll become a hey. When the matzah is complete, then takriv alel melach, you can put in its salt. Which, what is salt? Salt is Gimel Shemot, 3 names of God. Melach is the gematria 3 times God's name. God's name is the gematria Yud, Hey, and then Vav, and then Hey. That's 26. And Melach is 78. 3 times 26 is 78. That's the 3 names of God. That's salt, melach. Okay, what's going on? The Jewish people, when they got out of Egypt, by the way, on the night of Passover, I don't know if you've ever been on a Passover meal, but in the night of Passover, one of the first things you do in what's called the Seder, the meal of Passover meal, so there's a whole order of things you have to do. You don't just sit down and eat. It's not like a regular meal. You just make kiddush in the beginning and then you eat, right? That's what you wash your hands and you eat. No, there's a whole order of things that you do on the night. And one of them is you eat bitter herbs, you lean over, you drink 4 cups of wine. But right in the beginning, you take one of the 3 matzahs. You're supposed to have 3 matzot in front of you, 3 matzot, complete whole matzot, and you break the middle one. You break the middle one, and you take that part of that middle one you broke, and you set it aside. That becomes what's called the afikomen. That's the last thing you eat. That's what it says. One of the reasons you break it is because some people say that when you make the blessing on matzah, it has to be on a broken piece, because it's called poor bread, lechem oni, to remind us the Jews were broken when they were in Egypt, and etc. So that's what this also signifies. Matzah can be complete and matzah can be incomplete. Matzah can be broken. There's an argument, different opinions, if you should make the blessing on the matzah in the beginning, on the broken piece or on the whole piece. So therefore we say we take all 3 pieces and we make the blessing on the matzah, all 3 pieces, and then we drop the bottom piece to make the blessing on the matzah, so that there's the broken one and the top one is the whole one. Okay, so here he says like this. There's other Maimorim where it talks about the matzah that was before midnight and the matzah after midnight. The Jewish people were commanded to eat matzah together with the Pesach sacrifice that was before midnight. That was when the angel of death came, and when the mashchis, and when God's also went personally over and he killed all the Egyptians. Anyway, the Jews, first of all, they had to eat the Passover lamb together with matzah. That was before midnight. And then after midnight, they didn't have to eat matzah anymore. It wasn't any mitzvah anymore. They didn't have to. That's when that's when the plague was. They didn't have to eat matzah anymore. He says, why did they eat matzah? He says it was a different type of matzah. This was a matzah that was after the revelation of godliness, and the revelation and matzah before the revelation of God. So sometimes in other Maimorim here it says that that's why sometimes in the Torah matzot is written with a vav. That's the matzah that's after midnight, after the revelation of God. And there's matzah written without a vav. That's the matzah which is incomplete. That's a lechem oni. And here he says a little bit different way. He says lechem oni, that's the difference is the letter dalid and the letter hey. Matzah is mem tzaddik with a hey, right? A hey in it. But if the hey is not complete, the hey is one of the letters of God's name, then it's daled. Okay, it doesn't mean anything when the daled is there. But nevertheless, it's an incomplete letter. What's this show? The Jewish people, when they were getting out of Egypt, they were totally incomplete. They had basically no idea what they were doing. They just did what they were told to do. Take a lamb, kill it, do this, eat the matzah, sit down. They had no idea what was going to happen. They'd never been out of Egypt before. They didn't know God was going to help them in such a way. To take them all out of Egypt, they had to do it on their own. And so they were poor. They were poor. And afterwards, God revealed himself to them. Then it was complete. That's the three aspects of God's name. That's hinted at by salt. Okay, so that's what it means. The Indian is like this. Let's another explanation. If you perish lechem oni, what does it mean, poor bread? This is like sihora, like the moon. Aramaic. Late lo migarme klum. The moon has nothing of its own. The moon doesn't shine on its own like the sun. The moon only reflects the sun's light. The moon is called poor. Azahi bechinet ani. That is poor. Like it's written in the Zohar, etc., another place. And also in two places. The ein ani ela badat. What does it mean, poor? Poor means in your connection to God. Right? A person can have billions of dollars, but if he's not connected in any way to the Creator, so he's poor. Right? Any little wind can blow him over. Any little failure or something like that, it goes crazy. Here we see the whole story of Purim. What was the whole story of Purim? Achashverosh ruled over the whole world. His wife got him mad, Vashti, and he went berserk. He killed his wife. He was all miserable. He got all depressed. He didn't know what to do. Okay, it ended up to be a good thing for the Jews because he because of that he chose Esther. And that's the whole the story of but the fact of the matter is the man ruled over the whole world and he couldn't rule over himself because he had no connection with the Creator. He thought he was the Creator. That's what it means. Ein ani ela badat. A person, the only poor person is a poorest person that has no connection. Dat means connection to something above him. Al yedei kabbalata Meshimsha, the moon, by means it receives from the moon, nafka miskanta, it goes out of its poverty. Hainu al yedei shenimshach bo adat, namely that's signifying the Jewish people when they connect to God, then they become rich. There's drawn into them dat connection. Nibachina shemesh Hashem, from what's called the sun. The God is called like the sun in the sky. Like it says in another place, kitisa. It says Ashir, the poor. It says in Parshas Kitisa, it says that everyone has to bring a half of a shekel. The rich person shouldn't bring more, and the poor person shouldn't bring less. Who is the rich person? So it says the Ashir, the rich person, the Amura de Emtseisa. This is what's called the middle pillar. The middle pillar that reaches from the lowest level to the highest. Connection to God, even in the lowest places. Hainu Kava Emtsei. Namely, the middle pillar, that's called Dat Tiferet. There's three ways that you can arrange the 10 sfirot. I'm sorry, there's two ways you can arrange the 10 sfirot, one above the other. There's Chachma on the top, and then there's Bina, and etc. And then there's what's called three pillars. There's three of the sfirot, which are on the right side. On the right side, that's the side of giving. That's generally what's Chachma and Chesed and Netzach. Then there's on the left side, that's what's called Bina, Gevur, and Hod. But then there's the middle pillar, and that's what we're talking about here. That's what's called Dat and Tiferet. Dat and Tiferet. And this reaches up to what's called, sometimes it goes down to Malchut, and sometimes it depends which one you count. Or the Keter. That's the middle pillar. Look, that's what it says in V'yadata Oyoma, another mimer. O Mitchila, in the beginning, when the Jewish people are just in a level of Emuna, Lava, just faith. in God alone, with no awareness of what God is, then it's called lechem oni. Then it's called poor bread. Matzah. Matzah, this signifies the beginning of connection to the Creator. The beginning. To the Creator alone. Behold, Techila, the beginning of serving God, has to be emuna levad. Simple faith. Simple faith in God. Like the rabbis say, Bo Chabakuk says there were 613 commandments. Came along Chabakuk, the prophet Chabakuk, and he ruled all the 613 commandments into one commandment. In other words, by means of just keeping all the commandments are essentially just one. What's the one commandment? Tzadik ve'emunato yichya. That the righteous person lives in his faith. What does that mean? You really believe in God? You'll do all of his commandments. He won't ask you any questions. You'll do all of his commandments. One of the commandments is you're supposed to understand. You understand? You have to love God. To love God, you can't do that without understanding. Okay, but whatever you can, right? You accept on yourself just with pure faith. And what about the commandments that require understanding? Learning Torah? Okay, now I know there's a commandment. I'll start to work on it. And then after that, you become more mature. You have a more mature relationship with God. But that faith, that basic faith, always has to be there. That's the basis of everything. That's the connection with God. As soon as you think that God is understandable, then it becomes a big ego trip. God is just some idea inside of you. And the fact is, no matter how much you understand, and it's a commandment to understand, and if you know all the books of Kabbalah and understand everything that there is, the fact of the matter is that it's just an amazing gift from God, and you really don't understand how you can understand that itself. So it says you always have to have this basic faith in God. But in the beginning, when you start to serve God, that's all you have. That's the thing of the Jewish people when they got out of Egypt. The Jewish people, they're the example for the whole world. Because see, if it says, Pitchu Sharim, V'yavo, Goy Tzadik. It says, open up the gates, and there will come this righteous nation. What is that? Shomer Amunim. The gates are faith. It's in the book of Isaiah. Perish Rashi, like Rashi says. So that's matzah in the beginning. It has to be without any, this is serving God without any understanding. Sometimes even opposite your understanding. Right? You understand how God creates you. You feel it, but you don't feel God's creating you. No, I don't feel it. I don't know what you're talking about. Well, you believe it? Okay, I guess, yeah. You have to believe it. That's the essence of Judaism. That's the essence of mankind. To understand, you can't understand. First of all, you have to open up the door. The door is understanding that it's impossible to understand what God is. Okay, you got that? Yes. Now there's a commandment to understand. Try to understand as much as you can. But why are you trying to understand? Because it's a commandment. That's the basis of Judaism, faith. Another one, it says it. And that the faith is what is the shield, like of salvation. And from this idea of simple, open faith in the creator of the universe will come afterwards to dat. You can come to what's called connection. Shuhasaga Penimius. This is an inner understanding which comes from the Torah. Like the rabbis say, call him Makayim at the Torah. Any person who does the Torah from poverty, Sofa Lakayim Omi Osher, in the end, he will do it from richness. That's what it says in the 4th chapter of Pirkei Avot, of the chapters of the fathers. Well, Pirish, it explains in Midrash Shmuel. Midrash Shmuel is a beautiful sefer written upon the ethics of the fathers. Ratzilomar, what does it mean? A poor person, a poor person, a person who is poor that does the Torah from poverty, he'll do it in richness. Simple meaning is if you don't have any money, right? But here it's talking about a person is poor in that, in connection to God. All he has is just simple faith. It says if a person does the Torah, even when he doesn't understand anything, and he accepts the Torah, even though he's got a billion questions on the whole thing, but nevertheless he said this is the will of God, then eventually he'll come to really connect to God. And finally, in the end, he will do it from Osher. What does it mean? Osher Hadat, from a rich connection to God. Shiyashpil of love, fear. Then God will give you a big blessing from His wisdom. That's what it says. If there is no fear, there is no wisdom. And if there is no wisdom, there's no fear. What does that mean? You have to have fear. In this case, is faith. Right? Faith means I realize that God is infinitely bigger than me. I can't go according to my own conclusions. God, I have to do whatever God says I have to do. That's fear. Then if you have fear, then you can come to wisdom. On the other hand, how do you get fear? You have to have wisdom first. If there's no wisdom, you can't have any fear. If so, where are you going to begin? You have to have faith. And then you get wisdom. But you want to have faith. You can't get faith unless you have wisdom first. So what are you going to start off with? There's two different types of faith. The first type of faith is yiratato, which is called lower faith. Here he calls it fear. This is the door that opens, this is the door to elevation. Right? You're on the ground floor, you press the elevator, the door opens up, and now you can go up. That door on the ground floor, that's called lower faith, lower fear, if you want. In other words, the awareness that God is infinitely more real than I am, and I'm nothing. That's scary. But nevertheless, that's basic. That's how you say step one of connecting to God. Therefore, in yira, in chachma, therefore it says if there's no fear, you haven't got this basic surrender to God, then you can't have any wisdom. There can't be any inner connection. And afterwards, by means of this inner connection that you have, you start to understand a little bit as Yizkel Eloha. Then you can start to learn. And you learn all of the Torah, and you learn all the Kabbalah, and you learn all the Hasidus, and then you're a big genius and you know everything. Then you can come to the upper fear, which means that now you realize you're really nothing, that everything you have is just a total gift from God. And that's what's really called surrender. Shesham ein shayach chamutz. That's a type of a fear, an upper fear like that. That's like the big tzaddikim. They're like very simple people. I remember I was by, especially, there was a famous tzaddik who was called the Baba Sali, Rav Yaakov, Rav Yisrael Abu Chatzir. I have a picture of him there. And you went to him. I took my mother-in-law there once. He was very, very close to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. He himself was from Morocco. He was very close. They were like brothers, even though they never actually physically saw each other. Here's this picture of the Baba Sali. You ever see this picture? Beautiful Baba Sali. Bona bona shira l'Rav Yisrael Abu Chatzir. Bona shira. Anyway, so you went to him. You see, the simplest of the simple people. On the other hand, the guy was a lion. I mean, he was a genius. He knew everything there was, but he was, simple simplicity, ultimate simplicity. That's what's called the upper fear. That's what's called the upper fear of God. This is like the big tzaddikim, that they know everything and that they realize that they're nothing. Like it says that Moses was the most humble person in the world. That's because he had this upper fear. Whereas the lower fear, you don't know anything. So it's not, that big of a novelty that you're very humble. You're starting realizing God, well, God is everything. But as soon as you start knowing things, right, then you can be, God forbid, like Yerovam ben Nevat, we talked about before so many times. He's a big genius and he thinks that he's the boss. He can call all the shots. Yerovam ben Nevat, he said, with his greatness and with his wisdom, with his understanding, he made 2 golden calves. And this is like about 400 or 500 years after the Jews got punished because of the golden calf in the desert. He made golden. Okay. And so that's what's called the upper level of faith. And that's connected. Then there can be salt. We're going to see. Like it says in Sefer Shal Benoni, like it says in the Tanya, Chelik Aleph, first chapter, the Tanya, Perik, and the first section of the Tanya, chapter 18. What does it say over there? Peti Yamin L'Kol Davar. It says a simpleton will believe in everything. And who is that? That's Moses, it says over there. Why? Because it's a Kodesh Baruch Hu, because by God, Akal Patayim, everyone is like simpletons. It says it's like animals. It says, like it says, King David said, I was like an animal with you, God. In other words, my knowledge of God, I knew the whole Torah. King David, he knew the whole Torah, he knew all the secrets of the Torah. And he said, but in comparison to you, me and a cow are the same thing. We're equal in our knowledge of God. How can that be? Because when a person realizes the incomprehensible reality of what God is, and how that's all there is, God is creating us, then suddenly you realize, well, I don't understand what's going on at all. It's just, the whole thing is just an amazing miracle. You're just grateful that you could learn God's Torah, you could do his commandments. That's what it says. That's what it says. A man and the animals will save us, God. And you have to realize that you are like an animal. Of course, there's the bad side of being an animal also, is doing just letting yourself act like an animal. But that's an animal, doesn't have any connection to God. An animal can't, how do you say, change himself, defy his nature. Animal can't, and a human being can. That's a big difference. But nevertheless, after all, we realize that difference there is between an animal and a human being, that's only because God said so. It's not because it really, intrinsically, I'm better than an animal. God just made it that way. There's the famous thing with Nebuchadnezzar, that he went crazy. He went crazy for, what was it, 5 years, something like that? He went crazy, he acted like an animal. He ruled over the whole world, and he was standing up on one of his balconies or something, and he overlooked over this. He says, look, this is what all I made with my own hands. And suddenly, pop, he lost his mind, and he became like an animal, took off all his clothes and ran into the forest and acted like a bear or something like that for 5 years. Finally came back afterwards, and everybody accepted him. The fact that we can be geniuses and everything, this is just by the, how do you say, the grace of God. In Cain, no, I'm sorry. Elu b'nei adam shehem arumin b'das ka'adam harishon. They are like man. It says man, before he ate from the tree, he was naked. What does it mean he was naked? He was simple. He was simple with God. Doesn't mean that you should take off your clothes. That we have clothes and we have shame. It shows that we are appreciative of the situation that we're in. That's the situation. You can't pretend that there is no situation, that we really know God. If we would really know God, then there wouldn't be any shame, and there wouldn't be any of this of decadence and things like that. People would do exactly what God wants. And therefore, Adam he was naked and didn't have any lusts and things like that. But as soon as he ate from the tree, then all of a sudden he realized that his lusts and things like that could take him away from, make him do the opposite of what God wants. Okay. If so, when we have this obligation on Passover, to eat matzah, which is the beginning of service of God. We're commemorating just going out of Egypt, like being born, the birth of the Jewish people. We're like babies. Therefore, it has to have lachem oni. There has to be poor bread. Shehu bechinas emuna, which is just simple faith. Veskapia, and simply forcing yourself to do good and to turn from bad, beli shum tam v'dad, without any understanding. Okay, therefore, ein liten bo melach. Therefore, there has to be no salt in the matzah. Shamelach, because what does salt do? No ten tam, it gives a taste. Liot bechinas tam v'dad. That's taste. The word tam also means understanding. This is already more mature. Shehu giloi penimit Torah. This, as we said before, what is this salt that has to be with every sacrifice? What is this salt that makes these big changes? That's the secrets of the Torah. Chasidut. Bereshit avodah, the beginning of service of God. It's a very interesting thing that when you eat a meal, right? Eat a meal, so there's a whole big meal. You put a little tiny bit of salt on it, and it makes the whole thing taste totally different. That's all the same thing with the Torah. The Torah is called bread. Sometimes it's called meat. The Torah. But that's the Torah. With a little bit of salt, with a little bit of the secrets of the Torah. That makes everything interesting. It's the same thing with life. If life is not a mystery, then everything becomes boring. The word for secrets, mystery, is raz. It's the same numerical value as light. Or the Chassidut puts a little bit of mystery in everything that there is. So the beginning of service of God has to be lechem oni. It has to be with simple faith in God. Simple faith. There's no mysteries, there's no questions, there's no nothing. You just serve God, that's all. And afterwards, look, and therefore the Jewish people, they count, their months are reckoned according to the moon. Moon has nothing. But afterwards, the beginning of the month is nothing, just a little sliver, the moon. But afterwards, Surach Liot, Hamshachat Adat, afterwards it gets bigger and bigger, the moon gets bigger. And also after the Jewish people went out of Egypt and the sea split. But really immediately after, they could already put salt in. Shimsha, that's like the level of the sun in the sky, not the moon, the source of light. That's what is it, matzah ashira. That's what's called rich matzah. Then it's okay, you can have salt. Let's just learn now the end of the mimer, because that's what we skipped. We didn't finish. We can now finish. Oh. So that's what we said. Remember, that's what. So we just finished one thing about salt. It gives taste. It gives knowledge. Another thing about salt is the word for salt. That salt mixes everything up. It mixes everything. It sweetens up the bitter. It makes bitter what's sweet. So he says the words. This is really stressed by the fact that the same word melach is also the same word for a sailor. Remember we talked about that yesterday? It says a sailor churns the water. What is the water? The water is godliness. It covers over everything, and we can't see really the truth. That's the upper worlds. The upper worlds are hidden from us. So in order to go through these upper worlds, to go through this amazingly mysterious world, the sea of, how do you say, a mystery. So you have to have Torah and commandments. That's the ship. But a ship has to have sailors. The sailors, that's the secrets of the Torah. And the ship is the Torah and the commandments. And by means of that, the Torah and the commandments, and you have the secrets, that makes everything move. And you can move through this whole mysterious, not understandable, godly world. Takes you over the sea. Says, but all this, but Yeah. But what's one. That's what. But Kriyat Yam Suf, when God split the sea, that's the end. The Jews got out of Egypt, right? They ate matzah. 7 days after they got out of Egypt, they got to the sea, and the whole Egyptian army was after them. And amazingly, the sea split. That was all sorts of miracles in the sea. And the Jews went over and it drowned all the Egyptians, right? But it says when the sea split, what happened is that it split all of the waters, all the secrets were opened up, and the Jews walked on the dry land. What does that mean? You don't need any more ships. That's what it means. Bechinas Elyona Yoter says this level of splitting of the sea, this is even a higher level of being in these ships. That the ground became dry land. Then you don't even have to have the ships. Al dirich, like it says in another place, Sena or Ena, etc. That when God split the sea, then all the Jews, they received the crown. This was a preparation for receiving the Torah. The secrets of the Torah. It says when God gave the Torah at Mount Sinai, as he gave himself, they saw all the secrets. And the preliminary for this, the preparation, was when they went over the sea split, then they received what's called the crown of God. The inner will of God, they received directly. It didn't have to be in the Torah. That's why it says in the future, Moshiach comes, as the Jews will still do the Torah. There'll still be commandments, but it won't be for the same purpose. It'll be just to do the will of God, but it won't be in order to protect us from the secrets and protect us from this, to take us over this mysterious world. All the mysteries will be revealed. It says, then God will kiss us with the kisses of his mouth. When a Jew does Torah, says the words of Torah, when he does a commandment, then he'll feel he's being hugged and kissed by God. That's what it means, hafach yom, that the sea will transform. The upper worlds will transform to be revealed. Eskasi will be eskalia. Then you won't have to have all these garments, which are called ships, that separate between the person and the sea. Shaloni ten lahanos miyama chachma. Ki'im al yedei levush. It won't be like now that the only way that we can approach godliness is through the Torah and the commandments. Other than that, it's just a big mistake. In the future, we'll have pure godliness will be revealed to us. And the Torah and the commandments we do will just be in order to do the will of God, not in order to make any changes. The ultimate changes will already be made. We won't have to have the garments and the mushal that separates and examples, whatever, that separates between us and this sea of wisdom of God. This is like it says that Moses went inside of the cloud. And everyone will have direct connection with the Creator who is creating us, even the non-Jews. But it's all in the merit of the Torah. When God transformed the sea to the dry land, then you won't have to have any of these examples. You won't have any of the ships or the garments. It's something like it'll be like Adam before he ate from the tree. You won't have to have any garments. There won't be any separation. People won't feel egotism. There won't be any false egotism. But then it'll be derech yabasha. Then it says that the whole following God will be like walking on dry land. Like the Jewish people, like it says, like the Jewish people walked on the dry land in the middle of the sea. That's what it means. 6 days you should eat matzah. And in the 7th day, it says it's a gathering day for God. Sentence in the Torah. This is 6 days you should eat matzot. This is matzot with a vav, like I said before, that draws down godliness into the matzah that without salt. We said before, that's like the dalet without. That's the vav that becomes matzot, matzah, matzot, with a vav in it. And by means of this, afterwards, on the 7th day, comes what's even a higher level, that God, so first of all, the Jews got out of Egypt, that was matzah with, before they got out of Egypt, that was matzah without a vav. Then they got out of Egypt really after midnight. Then there was a matzah with a vav. Godliness was revealed. And then on the 7th day, they gave in a higher level that the whole entire world was transformed. The sea transformed to the dry land. All the secrets became revealed day to day. Then, just like a person knows his mother, his father, his children, so people will know God, will feel we're being created. Like it says, after God, you should go. You won't have to have any garments. It'll be pure godliness revealed everywhere in the world. That's the idea of the raising of the dead. When God is revealed, there won't even be any death. Like Rashi said, Yotam b'yom derech, like it says, God makes in the sea, he makes a path. Before we were talking about making a path, that was Torah and the commandments. But ultimately, what's it going to be is that we'll see the result of the Torah and the commandments, and that'll be pure revealed godliness. That's like the splitting of the sea. That's the idea of salt, why there has to be salt on every sacrifice, to churn things up until eventually reveal the truth, the real truth, that we're being created by the same God that took the Jews out of Egypt, the same God that gave the Torah. Oh, it'll all be revealed in the future. That's what we're working for. Now let's learn the Sikha from